Good evening, my fellow Americans. We're facing an inflection point in history. One of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come. That's what I'd like to talk with you about tonight. Early this morning I returned from Israel. They tell me I'm the first American president to travel there during the war. I met with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. And most movingly, I met with Israelis who had personally lived through horrific horror of the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October. More than 1,300 people slaughtered in Israel, including at least 32 American citizens. Scores of innocents, from infants to the elderly grandparents, Israelis, Americans taken hostage. As I told the families of Americans being held captive by Hamas, we're pursuing every avenue to bring their loved ones home. As president, there is no higher priority for me than the safety of Americans held hostage. The terrorist group Hamas unleashed pure, unadulterated evil in the world. But sadly, the Jewish people know perhaps better than anyone that there is no limit to the depravity of people when they want to inflict pain on others. In Israel, I saw people who are strong, determined, resilient, and also angry, in shock and in deep, deep pain. I also spoke with President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, and reiterated that the United States remains committed to the Palestinian people's right to dignity and to self-determination. The actions of Hamas terrorists don't take that right away. Like so many other, I'm heartbroken by the tragic loss of Palestinian life, including the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, which was not done by the Israelis. We mourn every innocent life lost. We can't ignore the humanity of innocent Palestinians who only want to live in peace and have an opportunity. The assault on Israel echoes nearly 20 months of war, tragedy, and brutality inflicted on the people of Ukraine, people that were very badly hurt since Putin launched his all-out invasion. We've not forgotten the mass graves, the bodies found bearing signs of torture, rape used as a weapon by the Russians, and thousands of Ukrainian children forcibly taken into Russia, stolen from their parents. It's sick. Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it. Hamas' stated purpose for existing is the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses Palestinian civilians as human shields, and innocent Palestinian families are suffering greatly because of them. Meanwhile, Putin denies Ukraine has or ever had real statehood. He claims the Soviet Union created Ukraine. And just 2 weeks ago, he told the world that if the United States and our allies withdraw, and if the United States withdraw, our allies will as well, military support for Ukraine would have, quote, a week left to live, but we're not withdrawing. I know these conflicts can seem far away, and it's natural to ask, why does this matter to America? So let me share with you why making sure Israel and Ukraine succeed is vital for America's national security. History has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine. Putin's already threatened to remind Poland that their Western land was a gift from Russia. One of his top advisors, a former president of Russia, has called Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania Russia's Baltic provinces. These are all NATO allies. For 75 years, NATO has kept peace in Europe and has been the cornerstone of American security. And if Putin attacks a NATO ally, we will defend every inch of NATO which the treaty requires and calls for. We'll have something that we do not seek. Make it clear, we do not seek. We do not seek to have American troops fighting in Russia or fighting against Russia. Beyond Europe, we know that our allies, and maybe most importantly our adversaries and competitors, are watching. They're watching our response in Ukraine as well. And if we walk away and let Putin erase Ukraine's independence, would-be aggressors around the world would be emboldened to try the same. The risk of conflict and chaos could spread in other parts of the world, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and it's supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region, and will continue to hold them accountable, I might add. The United States and our partners across the region are working to build a better future for the Middle East. One where the Middle East is more stable, better connected to its neighbors, and through innovative projects like the India-Middle East-Europe Rail Corridor that I announced this year at the summit of the world's biggest economies. More predictable markets, more employment, less rage, less grievances, less war when connected. It benefits the people who would benefit the people of the Middle East and would benefit us. American leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances are what keep us, America, safe. American values are what make us a partner that other nations want to work with. To put all that at risk, if we walk away from Ukraine, if we turn our backs on Israel, it's just not worth it. That's why tomorrow I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. Help us build a world that is safer, more peaceful, more prosperous for our children and grandchildren. In Israel, we must make sure that they have what they need to protect their people today and always. The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to, the qualitative military edge. We're going to make sure Iron Dome continues to guard the skies over Israel. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading. Look, at the same time, President Netanyahu and I discussed again yesterday the critical need for Israel to operate by the laws of war. That means protecting civilians in combat as best as they can. The people of Gaza urgently need food, water, and medicine. Yesterday, in discussions with the leaders of Israel and Egypt, I secured an agreement for the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from the United Nations to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. If Hamas does not divert or steal these shipments, we're going to provide an opening for sustained delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance for the Palestinians. As I said in Israel, as hard as it is, we cannot give up on peace. We cannot give up on a two-state solution. Israel and Palestinians equally deserve to live in safety, dignity, and peace. You know, and here at home, we have to be honest with ourselves. In recent years, too much hate has given too much oxygen, fueling racism, the rise of anti-Semitism, and Islamic phobia, right here in America. It's also intensified in the wake of recent events that led to the horrific threats and attacks that both shock us and break our hearts. On October 7th, terror attacks have triggered deep scars and terrible memories in the Jewish community. Today, Jewish families worried about being targeted in school, wearing symbols of their faith walking down the street, or going out about their daily lives. And I know many of you in the Muslim American community, the Arab American community, the Palestinian American community, and so many others are outraged and heartened, saying to yourselves, here we go again with Islamophobia and distrust we saw after 9/11. Just last week, a mother was brutally stabbed. A little boy, here in the United States, a little boy who just turned 6 years old was murdered in their home outside of Chicago. His name was Wadiha, a proud American, a proud Palestinian American family. We can't stand by and stand silent when this happens. We must, without equivocation, denounce anti-Semitism. We must also, without equivocation, denounce Islamophobia. And to all you hurting, those of you hurting, I want you to know I see you. You belong. And I want to say this to you. You're all America. You're all America. This is in a moment, in moments like these, when fear and suspicion, anger and rage run hard, that we have to work harder than ever to hold on to the values that make us who we are. We're a nation of religious freedom, freedom of expression. We all have a right to debate and disagree without fear of being targeted in schools or workplaces or in our communities. I must renounce violence and vitriol. See each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. When I was in Israel yesterday, I said that when America experienced the hell of 9/11, we felt enraged as well. While we sought and got justice, we made mistakes. So I cautioned the government of Israel not to be blinded by rage. In Congress, to make sure we can continue to send Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves and their country without interruption, so Ukraine can stop Putin's brutality in Ukraine. They are succeeding. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought he would take Kyiv and all of Ukraine in a matter of days. Well, over a year later, Putin has failed, and he continues to fail. Kyiv still stands because of the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine has regained more than 50% of the territory Russian troops once occupied, backed by U.S.-led coalition of more than 50 countries around the world, all doing its part to support Kyiv. What would happen if we walked away? We are the essential nation. Meanwhile, Putin has turned to Iran and North Korea to buy attack drones and ammunition to terrorize Ukrainian cities and people. From the outset, I've said, I will not send American troops to fight in Ukraine. All Ukraine is asking for is help for the weapons, munitions, the capacity, the capability to push invading Russian forces off their land, and the air defense systems to shoot down Russian missiles before they destroy Ukrainian cities. Let me be clear about something. We send Ukrainian equipment sitting in our stockpiles. And when we use the money allocated by Congress, we use it to replenish our own stores, our own stockpiles, with new equipment. Equipment that defends America and is made in America. Patriot missiles for air defense batteries, made in Arizona. Artillery shells manufactured in 12 states across the country, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and so much more. You know, just as in World War II, today patriotic American workers are building the arsenal of democracy and serving the cause of freedom. Let me close with this. Earlier this year, I boarded Air Force One for a secret flight to Poland. There I boarded a train with blacked out windows for a 10-hour ride each way to Kyiv, to stand with the people of Ukraine ahead of the one-year anniversary of their brave fight against Putin. I'm told I was the first American to enter a war zone not controlled by the United States military since President Lincoln. With me was just a small group of security personnel and a few advisors. But when I exited that train and met President Zelensky, I didn't feel alone. I was bringing with me the idea of America, the promise of America, to the people who are today fighting for the same things we fought for 250 years ago: freedom, independence, self-determination. And as I walked through Kyiv with President Zelensky, with air raid sirens sounding in the distance, I felt something I've always believed, more strongly than ever before. America is a beacon to the world. Still. We are, as my friend Madeleine Albright said, the indispensable nation. Tonight, there are innocent people all over the world who hope because of us, who believe in a better life because of us, who are desperate not to be forgotten by us, and who are waiting for us. But time is of the essence. I know we have our divisions at home. We have to get past them. We can't let petty, partisan, angry politics get in the way of our responsibilities as a great nation. We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win. I refuse to let that happen. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. The United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. My fellow Americans, thank you for your time. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
promise to you a very special guest who really needs no introduction, particularly to the leaders in this room and to the fire service at large. He's a friend, a passionate advocate, and a continuous champion for the men and women on the front lines. No president has ever assumed the nation's highest office with such an affinity and personal connection with us. President Joe Biden was a founding co-chair of the Congressional Fire Services Caucus and served in that capacity continuously until his election as Vice President of the United States, where he continues to advance our issues. And today, even with his busy schedule based on world events, the President of the United States is participating in the 2023 U.S. Fire Administrators National Summit on Fire Prevention and Control. Please welcome the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you, Dr. Lord, for that introduction. You and your team deserve tremendous credit for what you've accomplished over these last 2 years. And a special hello to Ed Kelly, my good friend. Ed, I can't see you out there, but I'm sure you're around. And Kevin and Chief Kevin Quinn as well. Look, I joined this summit virtually last year, and I wanted to be with you in person this year. But there was a critical issue I never required me to stay at the White House, respond to the terrorist attacks in Israel. We've gotten word that several firefighters have already been killed in the assault on Israel, and Dr. Lori and her team are in touch with fire officials on the ground. You know, you've heard me say before, God made man, then he made a few firefighters. And that's pretty close to the overwhelming human instinct is to run away from danger. And there's no more frightening danger than a fire. And when that bell rings, you run toward it. You put your gear on, you jump in the truck, and you do what you've got to do. Because being a firefighter isn't just what you do, it's who you are. But we also know your bravery comes at a real cost. This year alone, we've already had 61 line and duty firefighters deaths in the United States. And I've had far too many firefighter funerals that I've attended in my life, from coast to coast. This is a dangerous profession, and there's no getting around it. But there are things we can do to make the job a little bit safer. And that's what I want to talk about today. With the effects of climate change becoming more severe, fire departments that never trained for wildfires to fight wildfires are facing wildfires head on now. And Jill and I just visited Maui in the wake of that historic fire there. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. And we met firefighters who performed breathtaking acts of heroism, while their own homes stood at risk and some burned to the ground. This is National Fire Prevention Week. And the one thing we can do to make your job safer is to prevent the fires in the first place. So we launched a national initiative offering federal grants to help local governments adopt the most up-to-date building codes to make structures more resilient to extreme weather events and like wildfires and hurricanes. It makes a difference. In January of last year, a fire tore through affordable housing units in Philadelphia, killing 12 people, many of whom were children, in large part because the smoke detectors didn't work. In the wake of this tragedy, I signed a bill that requires affordable housing units to have reliable, tamper-resistant smoke alarms. Just 4 days after that, Philadelphia fire I just referenced, another fire took place, costing 17 lives in the Bronx, because the building made up of affordable housing units had no fire safe. None. It was not fire safe, period. In response, I signed legislation giving the U.S. Fire Administrator authority to conduct on-site fire safety investigations of major fires to determine what happened and prevent the needless heartbreak in the future. Too many lives have been lost from fires that could have been prevented, the fires. And people of color, people with disabilities, seniors, low-income Americans are too often the victims. You know, my administration is going to continue working to protect all Americans from these tragedies. But also, we also know that what protects firefighters, the only thing that really protects firefighters is more firefighters. During the pandemic, We invested $350 billion in the American Rescue Plan that states and cities could use to keep firefighters on the job through premium pay, new fire and rescue vehicles, extra staff during peak times. I also signed a budget providing $360 million to both the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program and Safer Grant Program for hundreds of emergency response vehicles, thousands of sets of turnout gear, and critical cancer research and cancer screening. Look, and to put almost 1,200 more firefighters in the field. My budget this year includes another $370 million for each of these grants. It's also past time to acknowledge the physical toll of these jobs. Toxic substances you've exposed to are almost certainly why cancer is the leading cause. The leading killer of firefighters is cancer. You don't have to look any further than 9/11. We stepped up and we did something about that. We would step up now. We should step up now. My budget includes $1.7 billion from my cancer moonshot to keep key parts of my unity agenda in the State of the Union to cut cancer death rates in half, to invest in research and development and early detection and screening, and to end cancer, which we could do as we know it. We passed the PACT Act as part of my unity agenda to help veterans like my son exposed to toxic materials and their families recover and receive compensation. You know, around 20% of firefighters are military veterans. You know, thanks to this law, the Department of Veterans Affairs has already provided free screening for over 4.5 million veterans from toxic exposure from burn pits. These burn pits, as you know, are the size of football fields. They're 8 to 10 feet deep, and they're used to incinerate wastes of war, tires, poisonous chemicals, jet fuel, and so much more. You know, we also just created a special claims unit at the Department of Labor to process cancer claims and all other claims of federal firefighters and to process them faster. You know, and we're tracking PFAS, the so-called forever chemical that for years have been in fire suppression agents and in your gear. I signed legislation to fund research aimed at understanding the risk you face from PFAS, and we banned the Department of Defense from buying gear, by the way, that contains PFAS, as soon as an alternative is available. In April, the CDC launched a National Firefighter Registry to collect detailed data to better understand the link between workforce exposure and cancer among firefighters. I'm also proud to sign the Federal Firefighters Fairness Act, giving more than 10,000 firefighters and their families critical workers' compensation and other benefits by making sure certain kinds of heart problems, lung disease, and cancers are presumed to be caused by the job. We also know the sacrifices you make are more than physical. According to one study, firefighters develop post-traumatic stress at a similar rate of troops returning from combat. And I don't know why that should surprise anybody. It's estimated that more than 100 firefighters a year die by suicide. That's why I signed legislation extending the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program, not only to firefighters who are permanently disabled, but to their families of firefighters who die after experiencing trauma, like PSD on duty. But we also know we need to do more on the front end to help firefighters cope with the mental health challenges that come from the job. You know, when it finally comes time for you to leave the job, you should be able to retire with dignity. That's why I was proud to sign legislation to make sure disability retirement benefits remain tax-free. Let me say it again. Those retirement benefits remain tax-free. I'm also going to protect your right to collective bargaining. Let me close with this. When the worst happens, when those alarms go off, when everything and everyone you love is in danger, there's no better sight in the world than a firefighter ready to go to work. So thank you for being who you are. I want to thank your families. Every time that alarm goes off and you respond, they wait for that phone call. Pray God they don't get that phone call. You sacrifice every day. They sacrifice every day along with you. Thank you for all the heroes you represent, on alert, on call, in communities all across America at this very minute. So God bless you all, and may God protect our firefighters. You're the best. You've been with me my whole career. You've taught me a lot. I want to know how many other people go out, risk their lives to save someone in their home, and then a week later stand on the corner with a boot collecting money to help someone rebuild a home they just lost. You're the very best. You really are. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
President, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership and your commitment to the nation's fire service. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Support out. How far are you willing to go to bring back Americans, Mr. President?
Gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing as honors are rendered, and for the invocation offered by Chaplain Colonel David Kelly, the Director of Strategic Religious Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the reviewing official, General Mark A. Milley, the 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Accompanied by General Charles Q. Brown, Jr., the 22nd Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And the host for today's ceremony, the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin III, 28th Secretary of Defense. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, Chaplain Kelly.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we seek your presence in this honored ceremony today as our military and nation honor General Mark Milley upon his retirement after 4 decades of impeccable service in uniform, and as we celebrate General Charles Brown Jr. becoming the 21st Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Brown and Ms. Shireen have gone the extra mile, pushed beyond where others have only gazed, and climbed to the top of our military, all the while shouldering a responsibility few will ever know. As he leads, I ask you to guide his steps with godly wisdom, direct his path with your holy light, and keep him strong with divine fortitude. Lord, you have expressed in your word that a life lived in service to others is a life well lived. General Milley has lived such a life. Today, he adds his name to an elite list of military leaders, including Bradley, Powell, Mullen, Myers, and Dunford, to name a select few. Lord, as General Milley prepares for life beyond the military, I ask you to bless him, Miss Holly Ann, and his family according to their sacrifice of service. Reward him according to his impeccable character, and bestow upon him the thankfulness of a grateful nation, only and singularly exemplified by the single word, honor. Truly, this valiant officer's relentless pursuit of service to country over decades bespeaks the right and privilege to don for all time a mantle woven and bound together by unbreakable and courageous strands of honor. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Please be seated. Participating in today's review, from left to right, is the United States Army Band Pershing's Own. The United States Army Band is under the direction of Colonel Bruce Pulver and led by Drum Major Rob Moore. Next online are soldiers from the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, commanded by Lieutenant Jacob Trollstra and led by Staff Sergeant Rashad Kelly. Next are Marines from Marine Barracks, Washington, 8th and I, commanded by Captain Greg Jones and led by Staff Sergeant Tyler Tallman. In the center of our formation is the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard, led by Sergeant First Class Ryan Morse. Next online is sailors of the United States Navy Ceremonial Guard, commanded by Lieutenant Stephen Acevedo and led by AT2 Matthew Coriano. Next are airmen and guardians from the United States Air Force Honor Guard, commanded by First Lieutenant Jacob Hale and led by Technical Sergeant Matthew Cox. Next online are guardsmen from the Coast Guard Ceremonial Honor Guard, commanded by Lieutenant Cody Mitchell and led by Petty Officer First Class Troy Lupamek. The last element online, dressed in the Continental Musician's uniform, is the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. The Corps is led today by Drum Major John Parks. To the right is the Presidential Salute Battery, commanded by Captain Nicholas Lambie and led by Sergeant First Class Alan Caro. And to the rear of the formation are the 56 state and territorial flags of the United States of America. They are commanded by Lieutenant Thomas Mesh and led by Sergeant First Class Mark Franz. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the advancing of the colors and remain standing for the playing of the United States National Anthem.
Detachment! Raise it!
Please be seated.
You ready to do this, General?
I am.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
I.
State your full name.
I, Charles Quentin Brown, Jr.,
Having been appointed the Chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff,
having been appointed the Chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States of America
the Constitution of the United States of America
against all enemies,
enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
and that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
to bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
And you take this obligation freely,
I take this obligation freely,
without mental reservation
without mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the office upon which I am about to enter.
of the office upon which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Secretary Austin and Mrs. Austin are now moving to the field to honor General Milley and Mrs. Milley. Prior to today's ceremony, General Milley was presented the Distinguished Service Medal from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and Coast Guard. He was also presented the Defense Distinguished Service Medal by Secretary of Defense Austin. Headquarters, Department of the Army Special Orders. By order of the Secretary of the Army, the following general officer is retired. General Mark A. Milley. The Secretary of Defense has awarded the Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service to Mrs. Holly Ann H. Milley. Mrs. Holly Ann H. Milley is recognized for distinguished public service in support of members of the United States Armed Forces from October 2019 to July 2023. As a devoted ambassador of goodwill and a model example for the spouses of all soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen, Mrs. Milley was an untiring advocate for the improvement of the quality of life of our men and women in uniform. For more than 38 years, she was a fervent ambassador for the needs of the military community. At every level of command, Mrs. Milley served as a family readiness group leader with a mission to listen to and advocate for military spouses. A career nurse with multiple military moves, she was a passionate supporter of military spouse employment opportunities, licensure reciprocity, healthcare quality and availability, and mental health education for service members and their families. Mrs. Milley's presence on numerous trips to visit both stateside bases and overseas areas served as a constant reminder of her steadfast commitment to our military personnel and reflected a total devotion and unconditional commitment to the values cherished within the military community. This dedication was further displayed in her support of the Red Cross service to the armed forces, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, Easter SEALs, and United Through Reading. Mrs. Milley gave freely of her time to many other worthy community causes that significantly benefited our military members. The distinctive accomplishments of Mrs. Milley reflect great credit upon herself and the Department of Defense. Signed, Lloyd J. Austin III, Secretary of Defense. On the occasion of retirement of this distinguished soldier, we also recognize the outstanding service of his wife, Holly Ann, who is presented with the Department of the Army Certificate of Appreciation for her faithful and devoted service. It is her dedicated support which made possible such a lasting contribution to our nation. By order of the Secretary of the Army, signed General James C. McConville, Chief of Staff, United States Army. At this time, a bouquet of red roses is being presented to Mrs. Milley on behalf of General Milley, signifying his love and her unwavering support for over 40 years of military service. Also at this time, a bouquet of flowers is being presented to General Milley's daughter Mary, and a gift is being presented to his son Peter. A bouquet of yellow roses is also being presented to Mrs. Brown. We are proud to recognize General Milley's devotion to our country, and we wish him happiness and prosperity in his well-earned retirement. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the posting of the colors.
Post the color! Snap! Right! Hey!
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Lloyd Austin.
Troops and the band, you look magnificent this morning. Thanks for what you continue to do for our country. Good morning, everyone. President Biden, Vice President Harris, it is an absolute honor to have both of you here with us today. Let me also thank the members of Congress, ambassadors, and foreign leaders who are joining us, as well as the former senior military leaders and former secretaries of defense. I'm glad to be here with so many of our senior leaders at the department, including our service secretaries, our service chiefs, the Joint Staff, and our combatant commanders. And again, thanks to you all for joining us today as we salute General Mark Milley for his distinguished tenure as the 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I'm absolutely honored to welcome General Charles Q. Brown, Jr. as the 21st Chairman. Now, the service members on the field today represent our joint force, the troops who General Milley led with such passion and skill as chairman. Every day, that force defends our country and supports our allies and partners, and advances our interests and upholds our founding values. So today is a celebration of every American who volunteers to wear the cloth of our nation. And it's a celebration of the distinguished career of General Mark Milley. Now, you may not know this, but he grew up in Boston. It's a little-known fact, unless you've ever met the guy. He calls Boston the Holy Land. So to him, Bobby Orr of the Boston Bruins is a patron saint. And Bobby Orr once said that hockey teams win because of hard work and sacrifice. Without that, he said, skill is just potential. But General Milley has never let his skill languish as just potential. He's always been eager to get into the fight. And I've seen that firsthand over our long history of working together, including one time when he got me blown up, literally. You see, during the Iraq War, I was commanding the 10th Mountain Division, and he was one of my brigade commanders. And during one of my visits, one of his troops was wounded. And Mark said, "Hey, sir, let's go into town to the hospital to see our soldier. We'll do it at night when it's easier and there's not much activity." And so as we prepared to depart, following detailed rehearsals, I said to General Milley, "You know, Mark, this just doesn't feel right." But Mark said, "Hey, don't worry, sir, we do this all the time." So we took Route Irish in Baghdad, which was known as the most dangerous road in the world. And we promptly got hit by an IED. It hit my door and shredded the tires on our Humvee. And it was pitch black and smoky. And Mark said, "Hey, sir, are you okay?" I said, "Mark, we just been hit. I'm angry because we can't return fire because the guy ran away. The vehicle is damaged. I recommend we get the hell out of here." And we finally did. And afterwards I asked, "Hey, General, has this happened to you before?" And Mark said, "Oh, yes, sir. I've been blown up about 5 times now." Like I said, he was always eager to get into the fight. And he's never hesitated to charge into danger for his troops or for his country. This goes back to his earliest days as an infantryman and a Green Beret, including his time commanding a battalion in the famed 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment. And during his brigade command, what I saw was what so many others have also seen: his vigor, his grit, and his tremendous leadership potential. So following brigade command, I encouraged him to serve on the Joint Staff. And there he learned a ton of skills that would help him later in his career. He continued to rapidly climb. And in 2015, he went on to spend 4 demanding years, as the Chief of Staff of the Army. And he loved absolutely every minute of it. And then General Milley agreed to serve another 4 years in an even tougher job. Now think of everything that our military has done during his tenure as chairman. We've taken on the pacing challenge of the People's Republic of China, confronted a once-in-a-generation pandemic, and led the world to help Ukraine fight back after Russia's imperial invasion. And General Milley has a deep sense of history, and he knows that future generations would judge us harshly if we fail to defend the post-war order built by American leadership. And so he hasn't just studied history, he has made history. Now, his sense of calling grew out of the proud military family, family heritage of military service. And General Milley's own life of service would not have been possible without his outstanding family. His wife, Holly Ann, is an accomplished critical care nurse, and she is also the real deal. At a ceremony a few years ago at Arlington National Cemetery, someone collapsed in the crowd. Holly Ann didn't hesitate. She started CPR and directed someone to call the paramedics. And after a couple of sets of chest compressions, the man finally took a deep breath. And that's not the first time that she saved a life at an event. One time at an Army gala, she performed CPR on someone else in trouble while wearing an evening gown. And for too many times to count, she's been a lifesaver for Mark and their family. While he was away on deployments, Holly Ann cared for their beloved kids, Peter and Mary. And over the years, the Milley family has moved more than 20 times. Holly Ann has had to transfer her nursing license to 9 different states. And she has helped countless military spouses to do the same. And that's made her a strong advocate for military families. So Holly Ann, thank you for your phenomenal service to our country. I'm also grateful.